The lights of the event hall bathed the room in soft gold, casting a warm glow over the sea of suits, dresses, and youthful eyes filled with hope. Cameras clicked in every direction, capturing the moment. It was the annual gathering of the Antetokounmpo Youth Foundation. A celebration not just of talent, but of perseverance, of roots, of every long walk Giannis had ever taken barefoot to a cracked Athens court. He stood at the center of it all, tall, poised, more than just a basketball player now. He was a symbol, not of a rival, but of what was possible. Kids from all corners of Milwaukee and beyond crowded around the perimeter of the main stage, holding up jerseys, shoes, anything they could get autographed. Journalists weaved through the crowd, parents snapped photos. It was a night built on inspiration, and Giannis was the flame they all gathered around. He smiled, that familiar boyish smile. As he leaned down to sign a poster for a boy no older than 10, the boy looked up and whispered, "One day I'll be in the league, like you." Giannis ruffled his hair gently, locking eyes with him. Believe that. Every day. Even when nobody else does. The words came easily, but as they left his lips, something about them caught in his throat. That sentence, even when nobody else does, pulled at a thread he hadn't tugged in years. A shadow passed over his expression for a fleeting second. He masked it quickly, kept moving, kept smiling, but it was there. There was always someone, always a voice. And tonight, for some reason, that voice was loud again. It had been more than a decade, but memory has its own way of resurrecting ghosts, sharp and clear like it happened yesterday. Athens, summer haze rolling over the cracked concrete of a forgotten neighborhood court, a scrawny teen with long limbs, second-hand shoes, and dreams far bigger than his environment dared allow. Giannis wasn't the Greek freak yet. He was just Giannis, the son of immigrants, a street vendor by morning, basketball player by passion, invisible to most, but not all. That summer, Giannis had earned a spot in a local youth tournament. It was a big deal. Scouts sometimes showed up. Coaches, hopes were always dangling there, just out of reach. But it was also where he met Nikos Dimitriadis, team captain, son of a former Olympiakos assistant coach. Blonde hair slicked back, always in new shoes, always talking too loud, too fast, with a smirk that barely masked a superiority complex. And talent. He had that too. Enough to make people listen. Giannis didn't talk much, he let the ball speak, but that made him a target. Their first game against Nikos's team wasn't even close. Giannis tried, hustled, defended like a maniac. But Nikos was surgical, draining threes, throwing no-look passes. After the buzzer, as both teams shook hands, Nikos paused in front of him, smiling, leaning in just enough to sting. "You'll never be anyone," he said, quiet enough for only Giannis to hear. "You're just a body, a mistake." It didn't sound like trash talk, it sounded like judgment. Final. Giannis didn't respond. He walked off the court, jaw tight, something flaring inside him that he didn't know how to name. Shame? Rage? Fire? Back then, he wasn't the kind of kid who answered back. He was the kind who remembered, who carried, and carry it he did, game after game, year after year. Every time he was told he wasn't good enough, every time he was left on the bench, every time a coach looked past him, every time someone laughed at his dreams, that voice echoed, that smirk. "You'll never be anyone." But he never let it stop him, not once. Back to the present. Giannis stood backstage now, minutes away from delivering his speech. He took a sip of water, rolled his shoulders, shook off the tension. His brothers were nearby, joking with guests, making the rounds. Music played lightly over the speakers. A coordinator walked up, smiling. "We're almost ready, just waiting for a few more special guests to be seated." Giannis nodded politely. Then it happened. He didn't see him at first, just a movement at the corner of the crowd. But when he turned his head, it hit like a jolt to the spine. There, standing at the entrance of the main hall, was Nikos, older now, thicker in the face, wearing a wrinkled button-down that didn't quite fit, looking entirely out of place. His hair was still blonde but thinner, his expression unreadable. Giannis froze. Time didn't stop. It dragged. Nikos scanned the room awkwardly, then spotted Giannis near the stage. For a heartbeat, their eyes met. Just one. And Giannis felt the past lurch forward like a wave. Not anger, not quite. Just weight. That old voice, crawling out of the box he had shoved it into. What the hell was he doing here? He hadn't seen Nikos since the day he left Greece. Their paths had never crossed again. As Giannis rose, so many from his past had faded. But that name, that memory, never quite did. He remembered a quote he'd once read, "Forgive your enemies, but never forget their names." And now, here he was. Giannis's mind raced. Was this a joke, a setup, some media trap? But as he watched Nikos shuffle nervously, almost sheepishly toward an empty seat in the back corner, he realized this wasn't a stunt. This was something else, something personal. He exhaled slowly. "Giannis," the coordinator whispered, "you're on." Applause erupted as his name was announced. The moment arrived. Giannis stepped out under the lights, towering, confident, heart pounding. The crowd cheered, cameras rolled. But inside, part of him was still on that cracked court in Athens, still hearing that voice. He gripped the podium, smiled at the crowd, and began. "Thank you. Thank you all for being here tonight. This is a dream. Not just for me, but for every kid I grew up with, for every boy and girl who's ever been told they're not enough, that they don't belong, that they'll never be anyone." A few murmurs of encouragement rippled through the audience. Tonight is for them. He glanced toward the back of the room, almost involuntarily. Nikos sat there, frozen. Giannis looked away, but inside, a fire was stirring, one that had waited a long, long time. Tomorrow, the world would talk about Giannis's speech, about the surprise guest, about what came next. But for now, in that quiet space between past and present, between the court and the stage, something was shifting. The story had come full circle, and it had only just begun. The applause rolled on, a wall of sound that filled the room like rising water. Giannis stood behind the podium, smiling outwardly, composed in the way that years in the spotlight had taught him to be. But inside, something churned. He felt it in his stomach, in his fingertips, the electricity of something unresolved, now standing just a few dozen feet away in the back of the room, wearing regret like a second skin. Nikos. His name echoed without being spoken. Giannis continued his speech, navigating the practiced cadence of gratitude and purpose. He spoke of his family, of his brothers, of their journey. He spoke of their father, who had passed before seeing all his sons rise, and how his memory pushed them forward like the wind behind sails. He thanked the city of Milwaukee, the fans, the coaches, the people who'd believed in him when he barely believed in himself. And then he paused, not for drama, not for effect, but because a truth was waiting to be told. "I've talked a lot tonight about the people who lifted me," he said, voice steadier than he expected. "But there's another kind of force that shaped me too. The people who doubted me, the ones who told me I didn't belong, that I'd never make it, that I was a joke, a mistake." You could feel the shift in the room, the tightening of attention, the sudden stillness of air. There were days in Athens when I didn't eat before practice. Days when I sold sunglasses just to help my family eat dinner. I was skinny, awkward, broke, easy to overlook, easy to mock. A slow breath. I remember one person specifically. I won't name him, but I'll never forget his words. He looked me in the eye and said, "You'll never be anyone." I carried that sentence with me for years. Through every workout, every game, every rejection, it burned. Giannis looked out across the crowd, eyes briefly scanning, but not settling, on Nikos. He didn't need to. The silence that followed said enough. People weren't dumb. They connected dots quickly, especially those who saw the moment earlier when the two locked eyes. "I'm not angry at that person anymore," Giannis said, lowering his voice slightly, "because in a strange way he helped me. He forced me to answer a question. Who do I want to be? Someone who believes in the opinions of others or someone who believes in his own work?" Scattered applause followed, cautious, respectful. Giannis smiled, the weight still present in his gaze, but lighter now, like a man finally learning to lay down a stone he'd carried too long. The rest of the night moved like a dream within a dream. Speeches were given, awards handed out. Kids played on the side courts, dribbling, shooting, laughing. Giannis moved through the crowd, talking with parents, coaches, former teammates, investors. But no matter where he went, he felt it, the presence in the back corner of the room, the unfinished chapter breathing just over his shoulder. And then, almost without warning, it happened. A brief shuffle near the stage, a man speaking softly to one of the coordinators, a small commotion. Giannis looked up and saw the coordinator approaching him with a puzzled expression. He's asking to speak, she whispered. Nikos, he says he doesn't want to cause trouble, but he's asking to say a few words. Giannis didn't answer immediately. His mind moved like molasses. 10 years of silence. One night of memory. Now this. But then, clarity. A strange calm washed over him. He nodded. If he wants the mic, let him speak. The coordinator hesitated, surprised by the response, but she nodded and stepped aside. A few moments later, the mic was handed to Nikos. Slowly, he made his way to the stage. The room didn't go silent. It dropped, as if the air was suddenly thinner. Conversations stopped mid-sentence. Heads turned. People glanced at Giannis, then back at the man stepping under the lights. Nikos looked older than he had from a distance. Not just physically, but in the way a man looks when he's been carrying things. Guilt, failure, time. He clutched the mic like it might slip through his fingers. "Good evening," he began. The words came raw, unpolished, with an accent thickened by time. I wasn't sure if I should come tonight. I wasn't invited. I don't deserve to be. But I'm here anyway." A pause. "My name is Nikos Dimitriadis. Years ago, I played in the same youth league as Giannis back in Greece. I was one of the captains, and I was cruel." A whisper rolled through the room. Nikos didn't flinch. "I told Giannis he'd never be anyone, not because I believed it, but because I was afraid. Afraid that someone who came from nothing could rise higher than me. And he did. Not just because he was better, but because he worked harder, loved deeper, believed more." Giannis watched from his seat, stone still. "I've watched his journey from afar. The MVPs, the title, the family he built, the man he became. And every step of the way I've heard my own words echo back at me, not as truth but as shame." His voice cracked now. "I came here tonight not to erase the past, because I can't, but to face it. To say publicly what I should have said a long time ago. I was wrong, and I'm sorry." For a moment, the room did nothing. Absolute stillness. Then, someone clapped. One person. Then two. Then the entire room stood, applause bursting like a wave breaking against the walls. Giannis rose slowly, unsure what would happen next. Nikos looked down, clearly overwhelmed, not expecting the response. He began to step away from the mic, hands trembling. And then, Giannis stepped forward. He didn't say a word. He walked across the stage, the distance shrinking with every step. Nikos turned, expecting what? He didn't know. Maybe a nod, maybe a dismissive gesture, but what came was something else entirely. Giannis wrapped him in an embrace, not performative, not polite. A real embrace, tight, lasting. The crowd roared, phones flashed, reporters scribbled, but in that moment, none of it mattered. Two men stood there, bound by a shared past, but no longer trapped by it. Giannis finally stepped back and took the mic. "I think maybe it's time we stopped pretending the people we used to be don't exist," he said. "Because if I had never heard those words, maybe I don't fight the same way. Maybe I don't push. Maybe I don't rise." He turned to Nikos. "Forgiveness isn't easy, but it's necessary, not for them, for you, so you can breathe again." More applause. Some in the crowd were crying. Even Giannis's brothers, who'd seen him conquer the world, looked at him now like they were seeing something even bigger. That night, something shifted. The event, already special, became unforgettable, not because of a highlight or a celebrity guest or a viral moment, but because the past showed up, asked for forgiveness, and was met not with vengeance, but grace. And the story wasn't over yet. Not even close. The energy in the hall didn't settle. It swelled. What had begun as an elegant community event had transformed into something rare, raw, vulnerable, human. The applause faded eventually, but the air didn't go back to normal. Something hung there, suspended. A sense of something bigger having happened. A healing, a rebalancing. The story they'd all come to celebrate, Giannis's rise from the cracked sidewalks of Sepolia to NBA superstardom, had just added a new chapter. One no one expected. One no one would forget. Nikos stepped down from the stage with his shoulders sagging, not from shame, but from release. Like a man who'd been carrying a secret for years and finally found someone to set it down in front of. He didn't seek more attention. He didn't pose for photos. He walked back to his seat, head low, eyes red, his hands trembling slightly as he clasped them together. Giannis, too, stepped away from the stage. He didn't head straight for his family or the sponsors or the cameras that now followed him with doubled intensity. Instead, he found a quiet corner behind the side curtains, leaned against a pillar, and breathed. Deep from the diaphragm. A breath that felt like it had been waiting 15 years to be exhaled. He thought of his father. He thought of the narrow apartment in Greece where all the brothers slept in one room. Of the evenings he and Thanasis had whispered dreams of the NBA into the dark, not knowing if they were planting seeds or clinging to fantasies. And then, for the first time in years, he thought of that old game, back when he was 15, when Nikos had last spoken to him before tonight. That game had been more than just a match. It had been a confrontation of identities. Nikos, the chosen one, confident and polished, with new gear and a father on the sideline. Giannis, the hungry one, all legs and elbows, with no fanfare and everything to prove. Giannis had played like a storm that day. Not pretty, but unstoppable. Rebounds, steals, chase-down blocks. He remembered the final whistle. He remembered walking off the court in silence while Nikos extended a hand. And he remembered not taking it. Back then he didn't have the words, only the burn in his chest, and now, all these years later, they had finally come full circle. As the rest of the evening unfolded, there was a looseness to Giannis that people noticed immediately. Something easier in his smile, something unburdened. He returned to the crowd and moved among them like a man not just honored, but freed. Guests came up to him, praising the moment, the forgiveness, the strength. He accepted the compliments with grace, but in truth the moment hadn't been for the crowd. It hadn't even been for Nikos. It had been for the kid in him, the one who carried that sentence, "You'll never be anyone," like a splinter under his skin for over a decade. And now, that splinter was gone. Later in the night, the event spilled over into the adjacent gymnasium, where the youth athletes were warming up for a short exhibition game. It was something Giannis did every year, play a few minutes with them, give them memories they'd tell for the rest of their lives. The gym was alive with energy. The sound of sneakers squeaking on the court, basketballs pounding the hardwood, kids laughing, coaches organizing. Giannis changed into a sleeveless foundation jersey and slipped on a pair of well-worn sneakers. He joined the warm-up lines without announcement, taking passes, launching shots, messing around like just another player. Then someone behind him called out, loud enough to be heard over the noise. "Who's guarding me tonight?" Giannis turned. It was Nikos, wearing borrowed gym shorts, a pair of old Adidas shoes that looked one size too small, and a grin that, for the first time, was devoid of arrogance. It was the grin of someone daring to show up. The kids froze for a beat. Then someone shouted, "1-on-1!" The chant picked up immediately. Giannis laughed, bouncing the ball slowly. "You sure you want this smoke?" he asked. Nikos spread his arms. "Maybe I deserve it." The crowd parted like the Red Sea. The two men stepped to half court. Phones came out. Cameras were already rolling. But again, none of that mattered. For Giannis, this wasn't about highlight reels or optics. It was about letting the story finish the way it was always supposed to. Giannis took the ball at the top of the key. He dribbled once, twice, eyes locked on Nikos, whose stance was surprisingly solid for someone a decade out of competitive basketball. Giannis jab-stepped, then spun left and drove past him with ease, rising for a gentle finger roll. The crowd roared. Nikos caught the inbound, smiled, and tossed the ball back to Giannis. Best of three? Giannis nodded. The next possession, Giannis let Nikos take the ball. The older man moved slowly, but with purpose. He pump-faked, took a hesitant dribble, and pulled up for a mid-range jumper. Swish, laughter, cheers, applause. Giannis raised his eyebrows and clapped. You got one. On the final possession, the energy changed. There was no more joking. Just two men facing each other. A rivalry revisited, not to reignite but to resolve. Giannis dribbled, slow and rhythmic. He leaned in, then stepped back and launched a three from the wing. It splashed through clean. And just like that, it was over. He walked up to Nikos and extended a hand. Nikos didn't hesitate, he took it. They shook. No crowd was needed, no speeches. That moment on the court said everything. Later that night, as the gym began to empty, Giannis sat in the bleachers watching the younger kids play. Nikos joined him. They didn't speak for a while. Then, quietly, Nikos asked, "Do you ever think about who you'd be if I hadn't said those words back then?" Giannis didn't answer immediately. "I used to," he said eventually. "Now I think more about who I became because I did hear them, and that's a different kind of strength." Nikos nodded, silent. Then Giannis added, "But if I could go back, I'd still take the win in that last game." Nikos laughed. "I figured." They sat there a while longer. Just two men, once rivals, now reflections. When Giannis finally stood to leave, he turned back and offered one last nod. Not of triumph, of peace. That night, as the last guests trickled out, the janitors began sweeping the floors, and the city of Milwaukee slept unaware. The Antetokounmpo Foundation event closed not just another chapter of outreach, but a story 15 years in the making. A story of doubt and fire, of bitterness and forgiveness, of what happens when the sentence, "You'll never be anyone," becomes the beginning, not the end. And when even an old rival can show up not to tear down, but to stand up, to face you, to change. And to remind the world that greatness isn't just measured in rings, trophies, or points. Sometimes it's measured in grace, in growth, in the silence between two people finally understanding each other, not as enemies, but as boys who became men. Together.